The crisp September morning air whispered around the hills as dawn broke at 6 a.m. on the 27th. But already and unusually, people were on the move. The inns were full, the boarding houses were fit to burst, and every available room was packed with people, ready to see the start of the spectacle. By this time the sun had tipped the horizon, thousands of people lined the route, ready to see history in action. There was one notable absentee, Edward Pease himself. Edward's home was in mourning. His 20-year-old son had taken a bad turn during the night. He had always been a frail child, but Edward loved him dearly. As the railway took its first breath, Isaac took his last. The house, stricken with grief, sent a messenger to convey their apologies, and as was tradition, the curtains were closed, the mirrors covered, and the family would take turns to watch over Isaac for the customary 3 days. At Witton Park Colliery, crowds watched with a mix of wonder and, for some, fear. Coal was loaded into wagons when horses would shunt them into position at the foot of the incline, ready to be winched up by the first of the 3 stationary winding engines. It was then horse-drawn from the other side and taken across the Gornless Bridge. At West Auckland, another wagon was added, making it a 12-wagon train. It reached the second incline with little fuss, and as the pioneers watched, it was attached to the second winding engine, and to cheers, it successfully crested the incline into Shildon. Waiting patiently at Shildon for its train, over 12,000 people marvelled at the simmering beast that had been painted in bright colours to show off its worth. The train was arranged to compose of 6 loaded coal wagons, 1 wagon of flour, 1 wagon with surveyors and engineers, 6 wagons with makeshift seats, 4 empty wagons for standing passengers, and for the gentry, the first ever railway passenger coach. It was called Experiment, and it provided a comfortable ride for the gentry. The crowd was an unusual mix of classes, with the railwaymen themselves taking centre stage. The men wore blue ribbons in their buttonholes and showed them proudly as badges of honour. At the head of the train, adjusting his sash, would have been George Stephenson. He couldn't underestimate the importance of this moment, for coal wasn't just the railway's primary mover, it would also be passengers. 300 tickets were initially offered to passengers eager to try this new technology, but sheer number of people that had gathered caused the promoters to panic. They boarded the 18 dignitaries, the engineers and the surveyors, but the rest? It was a scrum. Over 600 people managed to board, some even sitting on the coal and the flour wagons. Those that couldn't fit on the train boarded stagecoaches eager to follow alongside. At 10 a.m, Timothy Ackworth checked all was clear and passengers settled, and gave the all clear to George. He opened the regulator, and to cheers and looks of awe, the 400-foot-long train set off, pulling at a stately 12 miles an hour. To aid safety, a man on horseback sat ahead of the train with a red flag, warning of the train's approach. The ride was far from comfortable. With no suspension and roughly made rails, the passengers felt every jolt and tremor. The train came to a halt when Surveyor's truck derailed, and again a short time later when a piece of rope got into the engine's feed pipe. After that, there was no holding the engine back, and the passengers were cruising at a steady 15 miles an hour. 2 hours later, after a successful run, the engine came to a nice steady stop to fanfare rapture. 553 people had become the world's first railway passengers. They were greeted like heroes. The train was unloaded and the engine was given a well-deserved drink. And in a touching gesture, the coal delivered from Witton Park was distributed free of charge to the poor of Darlington. The train was readied again and the wagons containing a brass band was included. The train passed over the Skerne Bridge for the first time, and it were estimated over 700 people were aboard. At Preston Park, a stagecoach was travelling alongside, and George couldn't resist and opened up the regulator. The engine surged forward to the roar of the passengers egging the stagecoach on. The stagecoach spurred the horses on, and to great cheers both iron and horse raced. The lineman on horseback could barely keep up. but the horses eventually tired, leaving the engine the winner. Unfortunately, the good fortunes of the route wouldn't last. A man balancing on one of the wagons slipped and fell under the wheels. Luckily, he wasn't killed, but his foot was amputated. As the engine neared Stockton's wharf, guns sounded, people cheered, and the band played on. It had taken over 6 hours, but they had made it. People triumphed in success, and it was estimated over 50,000 people had watched the event. The train was left to rest at the quayside, while the guest dignitaries and those that had made it possible had dinner in the town hall. George, exhausted from driving, slipped away early. As he walked the dark streets to the inn, he would have passed countless people celebrating, railwaymen recounting their journey to anyone who would hear, and people singing the engine's praises as the engine slept nearby. It was the birth of the railway age, and as George settled down in bed that night, he knew it would only be the start.